afternoon, Your Honor. My name is, I've mentioned my name before, my name is Noam Binam, and I am now the counsel of applicant. And I have three issues to argue. If the Honorable Court permits, let me begin my argument.
You come first.
Thank you, Your Honor. The rights of the disabled persons to get equal access and equal benefits is provided. And the disabled couldn't get equal basic humanitarian assistance like food and water, like others couldn't get equal humanitarian assistance like food and water equally with others, because the administration distributes food and water 5 kilometers away from the camp which the disabled, displaced and disabled persons are staying in, and the roads are not suitable for the disabled persons to travel on and access the aid on time. To the worst, Your Honor, even if they can manage to get on time, food and water usually run out. Justice, Article 9 of African Union Convention on the Right of Persons with Disabilities states that to enable which to live independently and participate fully in all aspects of life, state parties shall take appropriate measures to ensure the persons with disabilities on equal basic others. On the other hand, Your Honor, as Ramo Federal Democratic Republic Constitution of Article 25 proclaims all persons are equal before the law, and they all entitled equal legal protection without discrimination. In this regard, the law guarantees to all equal protection without discrimination on the ground of sex, race, nation, nationality, physical condition also, and any other status. However, in our case, the respondent has been discriminatory against the disabled people by not providing this basic humanitarian assistance equally with others. Respected Judge, I, the counsel of applicants, say that the respondent shall take a specific measure considering the special needs of disabled as illustrated on Article 5, Sub-Article 4 of African Union Convention on the Right of Disabled. Hence, I inquire the court to see the respondent action is discriminatory, and I, the counsel of applicants, respectfully request the Honorable Court to issue an order to the respondent to take the appropriate measures to ensure equal basic humanitarian assistance for the disabled with others. Your Honor, this was my first argument. Let me proceed to the next. Secondly, the 103 children who are members of the displaced persons from Akapana rejected the registration to the school in Danabuzu for lack of document, while other 197 children are registered. Honorable Judge, Article 26 sub-article 1 of UDHR states that everyone has a right for education. Your Honor, right to education is unalienable and none can be deprived. None can be deprived. Hence, the right to education is unalienable and none can be deprived. However, the school has deprived these 103 children the right to education. Consequently, right to education for these children is clearly violated. Furthermore, Article 13 sub-article 1 of International Convention of Economic, Social and Cultural Rights asserts that the state parties to the present covenant recognize the right to everyone to education. They agree the education shall be directed to the full development of human personality and sense of dignity, and shall strengthen the respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. They further agree the education shall enable all persons participate effectively in free society, promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nation and racial, ethnic, or religious groups. Honorable Judge, rejecting this 103 children's registration, the school administration has denied them. The school administration, actually in Danabo zone, has denied them their right, fully development of their personality and sense of dignity, and denies the right of children to participate effectively in free society. Hence, I inquire the court to see the children's rights for education is violated. Thus, I demand the Honorable Court to order the school to accept the children. Your Honor, I have concluded my second argument. I will move to the third. Your Honor, in a condition that no necessary measures are taken to ensure the reliable and durable solution, the decision by the zonal government returning Akapana IDPs into their place of origin is clearly human rights violation. The third issue that I submit to the court is whether the decision to return the Akapana IDPs and the already started action of transporting them is human rights violation, because 1,000 returnees which are returned in first round witnessed that their home, their land, their farm destroyed, and the security in Akapana still remained fragile. I counsel for applicant content in the Ramo Federal Democratic Republic Constitution of Article 32 that any Ramoyan or foreign nation lawfully in Ramo has the right, liberty of movement and freedom to choose his or her place of residence. And the Kampala Convention, Article 9, Sub-Article 2, letter E, that state parties shall enable displaced persons to make freely and informed choice on whether to return or to integrate locally or relocate. The respondent has violated the applicant's right. Respected court, I, the counsel for the applicant, says the right for our client of freedom of the right for applicant for liberty of movement, freedom to choose place of residence, and the right to make freely and informed choice shall not be violated. Your Honor, may it please the court.
You can have a seat. Respondent, you come present for hearing.
Thank you, Honor. As mentioned earlier, my name is Hta I am the respondent in the case of internal displaced person. May please the court. Defendant Hasanori are presenting my defense complaint as follows. According to the applicant, the local government didn't violate the right of disabled internal displaced person. The local government received all internal displaced persons equally and treated them equally and fairly without any discrimination. According to Article 25 of the Ramo Constitution, all persons are equal before the law. They have equal protection without any discrimination. In this regard, all are entitled equal protection against any discrimination in violation of the Declaration and against any incitement to such discrimination. Your Honor, it says in our case, the local government welcomed all IDPs equally and provide equal access to the designated shelter and treated them equally in terms of ration and supply. But our government works in disabled persons. Honorable Judge, Manabo town is a town where the displaced person takes shelter at is a remote town and it has no any road access for humanitarian assistance convoy to travel on the access and the IDPs on their location. As a result, our client has made its highest effort to distribute the assistance at 5 kilometers as an urban solution to the disabled person. Even if any like 60% of the budget are to provide humanitarian assistance for internal displaced persons. So the road access situation is not good now in the time. It is summer, by the way. In that time there is summer. Therefore, there is no legal base for the local government to be held accountable for the provision of the basic service equally to all. I visit to the fourth issue. According to the applicant, Edana Bozon didn't violate the right of internal displaced person student. A request made by Dana Bozon to me, the enrollment requirement applicable to any student at the time of enrollment is not human rights violation. Your Honor, as per Article 28 Sub-Article 1 of the Convention shall consider the right of child to education and exercise the right in accordance with the principle of equal opportunity for all. A. They make primary education compulsory and free for all according to the provision of the obligation of the member state regarding primary education are twofold. One is to provide free education and the other is to provide equal access to education. Returning to the issue, it can be assumed the government's decision to open as many as possible schools in both urban and rural areas will provide equal opportunity for all children. The government is also providing free primary education, not free education. Your Honor, according to the school rule, any student must provide proof of enrollment. Of the 300 students in Akapana, out of 300 students, the school enrolled 197 students, and 103 students didn't submit the required school enrollment requirement. As a result, the school didn't enroll 103 students. This decision does not infringe on the right of displaced students. So, respected judge, therefore, responding to the denial of 103 undocumented students at the Nabo Zone School, we provide equal educational opportunity that applicants are respectful of the claim that they are respectful and don't infringe on the right of education. And I end my provision. I proceed to my certification. For most of the facts and the legal base of the second complaint are that the resident of the Akapana in Manabo didn't meet the criteria of internally displaced person under the Kampala Accord. Even if the court concludes that the Akapana resident meet the criteria of internally displaced person, the zonal administration decision to return IDPs to Akapana is a lasting solution. Your Honor, according to Article 1 of the Kampala Accord, internally displaced person means internationally recognized territories and boundaries, especially as a result of armed conflict, general unrest, and human rights violation or natural or man-made disaster. There are people or internally displaced person means there are people or group who have been forced to move out their home or places of the place in residence without being transferred. Accordingly, due to the absence of armed conflict between two forces in the Akapana displaced person didn't meet the criteria of internally displaced person. Your Honor, in this, therefore, citizens who are sheltered in Manabo City without complaint with the term of condition set out in this agreement can't be classified as internally displaced person. Respondents should not be accountable for the right of internally displaced person. Honorable Court, on the other hand, even if the court concludes that the residents of the Akapana meet the criteria of internally displaced person, the government has a duty to provide a lasting solution to the IDPs under Article 11 of the Kampala Accord. So, it is the last solution to return 100% in the Akapana because, Your Honor, Manabo City is a capital city of Ramo country, and Akapana is one of the rural areas of the Ramo country. Their lifestyle didn't meet in this situation, and the government, they have in his expense to return 100,000 people to their places, a last and best solution. Hence, I inquired the court to see the situation and there is no legal base for the zonal administration to be held accountable for the decision of the authorities of transporting and restoration of the IDPs. I think my argument may please the court.
So you correct. So you can respond to respondent's claim if you are. So we will proceed. So I have a question for the applicant. So regarding your first case, which is the decision of your school in Tenabo to reject the registration of those 106 students. So how do you said that you expect the school's registration to be disobeyed or those 103 school children not to be registered or are not registered is a violation of human rights. So how do you expect the schools to register those 103 children without any document as per the school's criteria? Because as a school, the school expects those children to have a full document. So without the children having a complete document to be registered, you would think we can call this right infringement or a violation of actual human rights because they are lacking documents to sufficiently support their claim for education. So can we say this is an actual infringement of human rights as to allow the schools to register?
Thank you, Your Honor. That was a terrific question. These 103 children are part of the displaced people, and the school shall take a special consideration for these children to take to register them as a student. They cannot provide the documents because they have lost their documents on the problem which is occurred, and maybe they left their home. Maybe they left their document in their home. So the school administration, maybe the school take a special consideration for the schools, for the students which are member of the displaced people.
Okay, the other question regarding the third allegation. Can we say that while the city is remote from roads, and the convoys cannot easily or actually cannot by any means access the city, can you say that there is a discrimination on the disabled persons? If yes, can we say that it is discrimination while we are talking about equality of persons under Article 25 of the Constitution? On one hand, Article 25 of the Constitution says that every person is equal, and if they are equal, if you presume that they are equal, so can you say that as far as the government is not directly discriminating between the disabled and the others on providing those humanitarian assistance, as far as they are not directly discriminating, can we say that it is discriminatory because for the mere fact that the place of the delivery of the humanitarian assistance is somewhat far from the city or from where they are living?
I say that maybe the government shall take a camp separately from the ordinary people for the displaced people, so they can move on suitable roads, and the camp is suitable, and they can move on such roads and access the aid on time. Actually, so if the government separates the camp for the disabled, the government will not be discriminatory for them. But the government take all as the same, and the road is 5 kilometers away from the camp. So it is
far. It is far. Actually, it's remote, but the remoteness is not only for those who are disabled. It's for all people. IDPs.
So I am saying that the government.
Can we say that there is this discrimination?
Yes, I am saying that the government shall take special consideration for the disabled.
Well, so equality should be understood. There must be an equal footing or the same field for all pupils. So those who are in similar situation should be treated similarly. Yes?
Yes.
So, the other question is regarding okay. Yeah, he has actually raised very concerning issue, which is school registration. As we know, there is some criteria or there is some documents which must be fulfilled for getting registered there. So some students, about 103, cannot actually provide that their documents. I guess we can see from the best interest of the child principle. When you say the best interest of the child, it means while courts or even any governmental institutions, while giving some decisions or doing something which concerns children, should take into consideration the best interest of the child. For example, in this case, the best interest of the child could be registering based on their documents. For example, some students might have failed the exam, or they might not qualify for registration. So if you in blanket, register all of them, then can we say that that's in their best interest?
As agreements on internally split people, that it's for as a durable solution, the government shall take appropriate measure for the documents which are lost in the accident or in accidentally lost documents. So the government shall take a special consideration or shall provide the documents again or maybe something.
So my question for you, on the first case that you have presented, you said that the government is planning to open up schools in recent time in order to solve the problem for those displaced children to attend the school. So do you think that will serve as an immediate solution for those children that are already destabilized? Because the plan of the government to open the school is in the near future as a plan course. So what happens to the children that are currently destabilized? Because for you to plan a future action of plan will not most necessarily include the current case. So do you think the government's action plan has somehow incited those children that are actually destabilized?
Yeah, the government working this situation in progress, not immediately. Now two solutions like immediate and progressive, and it have many people live in Manabo and another internally split person come to Manabo. They have not sufficient many in this situation, but it is on one to progressive change. And also the government work to exam on 103 students in progressive because many people betrayed the government in false documentation. So the government works in this situation in the progressive, not immediately, but he do his best effort to improve this problem.
Yeah, well, as a government, the government is expected to provide the best they can, or the best the government can. So what I want you to tell me is, in what context is the government actually participating in order to solve the immediate needs of these children? Because a course of action plan is something that you plan to do in the near time future or in a long time future. But what happens to the children that are currently, destabilized? Because the government, in its best interest to serve the children and to serve its people, I think it's more of a must that the government does more above than average, because it's the providence or it's the actual obligation of the government to serve the children. So what has the government tried? In what way has the government tried to solve the issues of these children? Is what I want.
The government is just best effort to solve this problem to prepare examination for 103 students in Manabo, and also we used to return them in the Kapana floor in their living Warada, because we didn't do in this situation. There are many 197 students registered, and also there is 103 students registered, and the government worked in his best effort to as many as possible the school to open in this new year.
So I don't think it has to do with the issue what you have said, because lack of registration or the name to be registered for those 103 students has nothing to do with building extra facilities. I don't think there's some relation, because the problem is not lack of enough buildings or facilities. The problem is just lack of some documents which is important for registration. The question I have for you is that there are 4 general principles regarding children's rights as provided under Convention for the right of child or CRC. Those main or general principles are: the first is the right to education. Education is the basic principles, or actually we can say that it is the basic rights of children. The other is the right to best interest of the child. The principle says best interest of the child. The other is the right to survival and development. The other is it's about four principles, and the other is principle of non-discrimination. So based on these four general principles, which is enshrined under CRC, is it actually to the best interest of the child, to decline to register those students for lack of some documents that they cannot actually bring at that time?
The government work in this situation like to prepare exam for 103 students, because many people betrayed the government in their increase their grade class, like grade 2, grade 3 increase. So it's in the progressive change the government prepare for basic examination for the 103 students. In this manner, the 103 students is far from education, and the exam for prepare them is to be in good teachers to be held to the children. So the government work in this situation as it progressively, but he do his best effort to problem to solve this problem.
Okay, regarding your first response about the discrimination against displaced person, you responded that since the city is somewhat far from the main road, the government cannot access those who are in need. So you can say that we are saying that, no, but who should actually be the cost of traveling about 5 kilometers from the main city? Who should be the cost? You can answer this from from the angle of government's duty to provide, to protect, to promote and fulfill basic human rights of the citizens. We are saying that government has the duty to protect, provide, fulfill and promote basic human rights. Yes. So if that is the obligation of the state, who should actually bear the cost of traveling about 5 kilometers, including those who are physically disabled?
Personally, thanks for arranging this presentation. The government are working for the disabled person to be, there are 3,000 displaced person, and they have to collect them, that is, who are the true disabled person. There are many people better us in the north for 300,000 people. He used add manpower and work in this situation. Who are the true disabled person, and to provide them 5 kilometers away in the organ solution, because it have many problems the government have. It haven't any budget to provide humanitarian assistance, and he used this solution as an organ solution for disabled person to be selected who is the true disabled person as a progressive solution.
So on your justification right now, you say that the government is trying to identify who's really disabled or not. True disability. So what has the government tried, or in what ways has the government tried to ask aid from outside? Because as far as manpower or as far as financial circumstances are involved, when the government is facing difficulties in providing these financial circumstances, they have the right, or the government has the duty or is expected to ask additional manpower or financial means from outside. So has the government tried in any way to add or to ask for additional supplies from outside the government in order to solve this problem as soon as possible?
In the outside government, and also we tried to in the documents in like computerized documents how to
city, Manabu city. Yeah. They didn't actually qualify for to be, called as or regarded as internal displaced person or IDPs. How? You say that they
In the past
in the fields, yeah. You say that they are not qualifying for to be treated as internally displaced persons. How? Because the Kampala Convention says that if there is any threat of peace or any threat which comes as a result of conflict, for example, violence, armed, attack, or other civil war, and displaced from their cities due to or their residents due to that fear of that threat, displaced within the boundary of their country. We can say that they are internally displaced person. In this case, they have actually there is some armed conflict, or there is some attack. You can say not actually conflict, but armed attack in the region. Then they are freed in the fear of that threat of security. So they are free to some regions within the boundary of the state. Based on the definition given by Kampala Convention, we can say that they are internally displaced. But you are saying they are not. How?
As I mentioned earlier, in the Kampala Accord Article 1, internally displaced person means internationally recognized territory boundaries, especially as a result of armed conflict into force. In the Akapana, there is no between two forces armed conflict, and also 75% of the Akapana people live in the Akapana or the state. So there are 1/4 part of the people displaced to the Manabo. There are for 12,000 people, 3,000 people only displaced to the Manabo. So in this situation, they are not internal displaced person. Even if the court concludes that they are internal displaced person, the government is the last solution to be returned for the internal displaced person, because in the Kampala Convention, according to Article 11, they have a duty and responsibility, the government, to do best solution for internal displaced person. So if they are returned for 100,000 people to the Akapana, one of the best solutions.
But still the threat is continued. The threat has continued still. There is armed attack. So it is safe for them to repatriate them to their resident place without consulting them.
The government
It did in their best interest. As you can understand from the case, when some of them has returned for their resident area, no? So when they arrived there, what they have witnessed that the conflict, the armed attack still has continued.
Yes, the government best work to solve this problem in the armed conflict, because it has many problems in the southern part of the other Ramo country, but in the Akapana Rada, they have only one armed conflict. So the government has to try to solve this security situation. And the returning people is one of the best solutions, as the government mentioned.
But like you're saying, the case of the current peaceful situation of the country is not still stable. So do you think, like he has said earlier, do you think it's in the best interest of the people to return them to the place that they have originally lived in while the shooting is still going on? Because as a government, the first priority of a government is to protect its people from any action of force. So as the internal conflict is still going on, do you think it will serve the people's interest as being safe to return them to a place where the shooting is still going on?
The government has worked in this station from not by himself only. He can work for the Akapana people, because people or citizens and government are combined to work for their security in the other civil society workers. So if the 100,000 people can respond to the Akapana, they have workers like combined to the main. They have to defend the security security threat in the government.
But they're still not feeling safe. So if you're returning those 1,000 people to a place where the shooting is still going on, how do you expect them to feel safe? Because for you to feel safe, you must recognize that the government is fully protecting you. So those 1,000 people have the right to migrate to wherever they want. Because in a situation where the internal war conflict is still going on, you cannot force those people to go back to their country. So they, as a citizen, have the right to choose where they settle in. Because you cannot force a person to live in a state where the current shooting is still going on, right? So how do you think the government would react in a state or in a stage where we have to, reinforce people to live in a place where there is still war going on?
In the Kaparata, they have it's a high armed conflict between people. It is the small armed conflict in one. So the government to solve this problem, like as his peacekeeper said also, that when the 1,000 people comes to their place of residence, they have work to solve this problem to provide the government, and not only the government work in this situation, but the government work as his peacekeeper.
But the government is still not doing enough because people cannot live in a place where there is still a shooting going on, right? So do you think you would feel safe if you've been moved to a place where there is a shooting?
But it's not the sufficient evidence is like.
So there is lack of evidence.
Yeah,
of the
lack
shooting.
of evidence.
That's what you should say.
So, we have adjourned the case for April 30. So, the court is dismissed.